Welcome back. Today we're going to explore something, well, quite difficult. We're looking into the source material for a truly haunting story from Taiwan.
It's definitely one that sticks with you.
Yeah, and this isn't just about recounting events. It's really about looking closely at how powerful beliefs and some really challenging circumstances can intersect in, well, tragic ways.
Absolutely. It forces you to think about faith, reality, and psychological states, and how fragile that intersection can be.
Exactly. So we're focusing on the Wu family. The sources describe them as, a seemingly ordinary family living in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. But their lives took this incredibly disturbing turn around 2005.
A really sharp turn.
Our goal here is to unpack the key details from the source we have, mainly a transcript about the case, to try and understand how things could spiral so terribly within that home.
To really get it, we need to set the scene. Kaohsiung, Taiwan, specifically the Delusion district back in 2005. It's an area where you see tradition mixing with modern city life.
So old beliefs are still very much present.
Very much so. And that cultural context is, well, it's absolutely vital here. You have strong Taoist traditions, a deep respect for nature spirits, and popular deities are really revered. The source specifically highlights Neza in this area.
Neza, the god of, what was it? Victory and bravery.
Right. Victory, bravery, even things like filial piety. He's seen as a protector. This strong current of faith is absolutely central to the Wu family's story.
And the family itself. The source paints them as pretty middle class, lived in a small 3-story house.
That's right. 6 of them. The father, he was 56, the mother, and 4 adult children, 3 daughters and a son. And initially, neighbors just saw them as a normal, loving family.
Nothing out of the ordinary at first glance.
Not at all. And their faith wasn't just a casual thing. The source mentions they were very devout, regularly visiting a local shrine dedicated to Neza for prayer and practice. It seems like it was a big part of their family life.
But one daughter, the eldest, she wasn't living there.
Correct. Feng-juan. She was 29, a nurse, and she was living and working about 300 kilometers away in Taipei.
So she had her own life, separate from the family home. A career in nursing, which you'd think involves a scientific outlook.
It does, but as we'll see, she was still very deeply connected to her family and their beliefs. That connection becomes crucial.
That distance is interesting, considering what unfolds.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this scene. A devout family, strong cultural beliefs, one daughter away. Then the source says around 2005, things started shifting. Neighbors noticed.
Yes, definitely a noticeable change in their behavior. The source points out they stopped going to the shrine as much. They became much more withdrawn, mostly staying inside the house.
And then there were the sounds coming from inside. Not typical family arguments?
No, not at all. Neighbors reported hearing strange noises, odd language, maybe ritualistic, scolding tones, and sometimes really loud chanting or praying, often late at night.
Really unsettling for people living nearby, I imagine.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just their behavior that changed. The house physically transformed too. It became sealed off.
Sealed off how?
Well, the front door was basically never used, never opened. They put up Bagua talismans at the entrance.
Which are for protection in Taoism, right? To ward off evil.
Exactly. Believed to reflect negative energy or evil spirits. And they didn't stop there. They hung this large black cloth, also with a Bagua symbol, over the balcony, completely blocking any view inside.
Wow. So they literally created a barrier, shutting themselves off from the outside world.
Completely. It was like the house itself became this isolated, hidden space.
That feeling of isolation, the weird sounds, it sets a very ominous stage. The source then points to one specific event, February 2005, as being the real catalyst.
Right. That's when the third daughter suddenly became ill. But it wasn't a normal illness. Strange symptoms, and she was plagued by recurring nightmares.
And she believes she received a message from Neza.
Yes, that's what she claimed. A really dire message. She said Neza warned them that Feng-juan's life, the eldest daughter in Taipei, was in grave danger. Her fate was sealed unless she came home by the end of February.
And the family, steeped in their faith, they bought into this. They believed the message.
Absolutely. Given their deep reverence for Neza, they took this warning conveyed through their daughter extremely seriously. The parents called Feng-juan immediately,
urging her to come home because of this perceived supernatural threat.
Exactly. It was urgent, compelling her to return.
And Feng-juan, despite the distance, the suddenness, the alarming nature of it all, she came back.
She did. He traveled back by train. The source suggests her strong family ties were the driving force. She felt she had to go.
And when she first got back, things seemed Okay.
Initially, yeah, apparently things calmed down a bit. They even had a small welcoming gathering for her. And interestingly, the third daughter, the one whose illness started all this, her strange symptoms just disappeared once Feng-juan was home.
You'd hope that would be the resolution. Crisis averted. But no.
No. This is where the story takes a significantly darker, more disturbing turn. After Feng-juan returned to that family home environment, she started having horrific nightmares.
What kind of nightmares?
The source is specific here, mentioning recurring nightmares of sexual assault. Night after night. For 4 nights straight.
That must have been terrifying for her. How did it affect her?
The impact was profound and immediate. Her whole personality seemed to shift. She became extremely paranoid, anxious, totally withdrawn, exhausted from the lack of sleep and the terror.
And then came the claim of possession.
Yes. One night, she suddenly declared she was possessed by Guanyin.
Guanyin. The voice of compassion, right. That seems like a stark contrast to what happened next.
Exactly. Guanyin is associated with mercy and kindness in Taiwanese belief, which makes Feng-juan's subsequent behavior even more jarring and frightening. She claimed she was on a mission.
A mission from Guanyin.
She insisted her actions were sacred commands from Guanyin, part of a divine task to eliminate evil forces.
And this led to self-harm. That feels so contrary to the image of Guanyin.
It does, frighteningly so. She began inflicting serious injuries on herself, claiming it was necessary, commanded to expel this evil.
What kind of injuries?
She'd hit her own thighs until they were severely bruised. She scratched her face raw with her fingernails. She repeatedly banged her head against the wall. The source says the family desperately tried to stop her, but she was relentless, completely consumed by it. Day and night.
I can't imagine what the family was going through.
Yeah.
Watching this unfold.
Like agonizing. And you see, the source suggests that while they might have initially tried to believe her claim about Guanyin, the sheer violence of the self-harm, it felt wrong. It didn't fit. That contradiction seems to be what led them to suspect it wasn't Guanyin at all, but maybe an evil spirit controlling her.
That makes sense. The source also brings up a cultural point here about spirit mediums. Ma song or tanki.
Right. It mentions that some spirit mediums in Taiwanese culture might perform acts of self-mutilation as a way to demonstrate their connection to the divine as proof.
So maybe the family initially tried to understand it through that lens.
It's possible. It doesn't fully explain the severity or the nature of Feng-juan's actions, but it offers a potential cultural framework they might have initially grasped at before concluding it was something sinister, something evil.
And Feng-juan just kept getting worse.
Yes. Her state continued to deteriorate. She started speaking in strange languages, her original personality seemingly gone. The family tried their own rituals, home exorcisms, but nothing worked.
They must have felt desperate, so they decided they needed outside help.
They did. They decided to take Feng-juan to a place called Five Finger Mountain Wuzishan in Hsinchu.
And this mountain, the source says it has a particular spiritual reputation.
Yes, it's seen as a sacred place in local beliefs, believed to be home to various spirits, both good and, well, bad. There are also stories about restless souls there, maybe seeking revenge.
So a powerful place, spiritually speaking.
Very. The central peak in particular is said to have negative energy. People report feeling weak there, getting headaches, nausea, even hearing voices. But other peaks are apparently used for spiritual practice and, importantly, exorcism.
So they went there seeking an expert, a master.
Exactly. They consulted a master at the mountain about Feng-juan's condition.
And what was the master's diagnosis? Was it spiritual?
Completely rooted in spiritual beliefs, according to the source. He told them the problem was twofold. First, they'd improperly moved their home statue of Neza without the correct rituals. This had apparently angered the deity, or made them vulnerable.
Okay, so disrespecting the deity. What was the second part?
Second, he said their house had bad feng shui. You know, the traditional practice of arranging space for energy flow. Their house being at a 3-way intersection, the master saw this as creating bad energy. He basically called it a ghost magnet, attracting spirits.
Wow, a very specific spiritual explanation. And what was his solution?
He gave them clear instructions.
Right.
The Neza statue had to be taken to another district, Nangxi, and burned by a different medium to destroy the evil spirit attached to it. And Feng-juan, she had to stay at the mountain for a full month for meditation and spiritual practice.
And the family? Did they believe this? Did they follow it?
They completely accepted it. The source indicates they fully believed the master's diagnosis and instructions and immediately started doing exactly what he said.
Now, here's an interesting twist the source points out. While Feng-juan was away from the house, at the mountain, she got better.
That's what the source states, yes. Her condition reportedly improved significantly during that month of practice. She completed the month, and the family followed through too. They had the Neza statue burned as instructed. Then she returned home.
But the house itself, it was still sealed, still dark.
Yes, that environment hadn't changed. And tragically, as soon as Feng-juan returned to that specific, isolated setting, her condition plummeted again.
She relapsed.
Rapidly. She fell right back into it, again claiming she was possessed by Guanyin.
Oh, no. And this is where it gets even worse, unimaginably worse.
This is where the horror escalates beyond comprehension, because this time, according to the source, the symptoms weren't just in Feng-juan. All 6 family members simultaneously began showing what they believed were signs of possession.
All 6. At the same time, claiming possession by different deities.
Yes. The delusion became shared, collective. The source lists who each person claimed to be. The father believed he was the Jade Emperor, the highest deity in the Taoist pantheon. The mother claimed she was the Queen Mother. Feng-juan stuck with Guanyin. The second daughter thought she was one of the 7 fairies. The third daughter, the one who got sick initially, now claimed to be Neza. And the son believed he was Jigong, a sort of eccentric but revered monk figure.
I mean, you can't even picture the chaos inside that house. 6 people, each believing they're a different god.
It led to a complete breakdown of everything. Family bonds dissolved instantly, because each person was utterly convinced they were the true deity and that all the others were possessed by evil spirits masquerading as gods. They turned on each other.
Violently.
Horrifically. The source then recounts what happened inside that sealed house over the next month, and it's deeply disturbing.
What did it describe?
Brutal physical violence. They were constantly attacking each other, hitting, pulling hair, punching, kicking, just relentlessly assaulting one another.
And torture, using incense sticks.
Yes. They used lit incense sticks to burn each other's bodies. In their minds, this was some kind of purification, a way to expel the evil spirits they saw in each other.
Oh my God. Beyond the violence, there were these bizarre rituals too.
Constantly. Pouring salt and rice all over the floors, sticking talismans everywhere on walls, doors, all part of these frantic, desperate attempts to exorcise the demons they believed inhabited their family members.
It sounds like a complete descent into madness.
Yeah.
The breakdown wasn't just spiritual or violent, was it?
No, it was a total collapse of basic humanity. The source describes a complete abandonment of hygiene. They started urinating and defecating right there inside the house.
And smearing it.
Yes, smearing feces and urine on the walls, believing somehow this was part of the process, part of fighting the evil.
And they stopped eating and drinking.
They did. Because they believed they were deities, they thought they didn't need food or water, so they stopped. Which, of course, severely weakened them physically, on top of everything else.
The source mentions acts that are just unspeakable.
It does. It states they reached the point of eating each other's feces and drinking each other's urine. It's almost impossible to comprehend the state they were in.
The neighbors must have heard this chaos. The yelling, the chanting.
Oh, they heard it. The sounds coming from the house were terrifying. It got so bad that some neighbors, according to the source, actually moved out temporarily. They were genuinely frightened for their own safety.
After a month of this, this absolute horror, the 5 family members, excluding Feng-juan, they came to some sort of agreement.
A chilling consensus, yes. The source indicates that the 5 of them collectively decided that Feng-juan, the eldest daughter, embodied the most powerful, the most evil spirit among them.
And their decision
was horrific. They concluded the only way to finally get rid of this ultimate demon was to destroy the body it inhabited. They decided they had to kill Feng-juan.
The details. The source described how they did it.
It did. It describes them collectively torturing and attacking her, beating her, continuing to burn her with incense, forcing feces into her mouth. Feng-juan was already incredibly weak from starvation, dehydration, and the month of abuse. She died from this final, brutal assault.
When did she die?
April 9th, 2005.
What happened immediately after? Did they realize what they'd done?
Not in the way we'd understand it. The source notes that after Feng-juan died, this strange, eerie calm seemed to fall over the remaining 5. In their shared delusion, they genuinely believed they had succeeded. They'd killed the evil spirit.
So they didn't report the death? Or try to get help?
No. They decided against reporting it, against taking the body to a hospital. They were still clinging to this belief that the real Feng-juan, her spirit, would somehow return. That the body left behind was just the empty vessel of the demon they'd finally vanquished.
But even that twisted logic didn't hold?
No. Because the very next day, the mother claimed Feng-juan's spirit appeared to her, threatening her,
So now they thought she was a vengeful ghost.
Exactly. That convinced them they needed to get rid of the body immediately to protect themselves from this vengeful spirit.
So they took the body out of the house.
Yes. They carried Feng-juan's body out and left it near the entrance of a nearby hospital. Then they apparently hid and watched.
And inevitably the body was found.
Yes. It was discovered, police were called, and she was identified as Wu Feng-juan. The police then went straight to the Wu family house. They found the street eerily quiet, neighbors clearly terrified, and the house still sealed up tight.
What did the police encounter when they finally got inside?
It sounds horrific. According to the source, the moment they opened the door, they were hit by this overwhelming stench. Swarms of insects reportedly flew out.
And inside?
Just chaos. Dark, because the windows were all taped shut, so there was terrible ventilation. The floors were covered in human waste, salt, rice, and bloodstains. Some fresh, some old and dried.
Just a scene of utter squalor and violence.
Absolutely. And there was this one bizarre, chilling detail the source mentions. The dining table near their family altar was comparatively clean, but the plates sitting on it didn't hold food. They held human excrement.
Unbelievable. The 5 remaining family members were found there, apprehended?
Yes, they were apprehended inside the house.
And what did they tell the police? Did they confess?
Their statement was completely consistent with their delusion. They told the police that Feng-juan had been possessed by an incredibly powerful evil spirit, that they had tried everything humanly possible to save her, to drive it out, but in the end, the spirit had killed her. They genuinely believed they were victims who had battled a supernatural force.
This must have been a huge, shocking case in Taiwan.
Oh, absolutely. It received massive media attention, understandably so.
So when it went to court, what was the legal strategy? How did they defend themselves?
They didn't plead guilty to intentional murder. Their defense was built around their mental state. They argued they weren't trying to kill Feng-juan, their daughter and sister, but were desperately trying to eliminate an evil spirit possessing her. They claimed they were in a state of profound confusion, possibly even amnesia about specifics, really pushing the idea of severe psychological impairment.
Which led to psychiatric evaluations.
Yes, all 5 were sent for forensic psychiatric evaluation to determine their mental state at the time the crimes occurred.
And what did the psychiatrist find?
The finding, as noted in the source, was crucial. The psychiatrist concluded that all 5 were suffering from a form of shared psychotic disorder.
Shared psychotic disorder. Like folie à deux, but for a whole family.
Exactly. Sometimes called shared delusion psychosis. It's rare, but it happens when a dominant person develops a delusion and then transmits it to others they're closely associated with, especially in isolated conditions. The source also mentioned a possible link to a culture-bound syndrome, something specific to their cultural context. The psychiatrist attributed it significantly to their prolonged isolation in that dark, oppressive, terrifying environment. It created extreme psychological fragility.
So the isolation and the environment were key factors in this shared break from reality.
Very much so. It created the perfect storm for this delusion to take hold and spread among them.
How did this psychiatric finding impact the court's decision? They weren't charged with murder.
It had a major impact. Based on that evaluation confirming their severely impaired mental state, the court did not charge them with murder. Instead, they were charged with a lesser offense: abandonment of a dependent person resulting in death.
What does that mean exactly?
The court basically acknowledged that Feng-juan was incredibly weak and vulnerable due to the torture and forced fasting. As her family, they had a duty of care. By failing to seek any medical help for her in that state, they effectively abandoned her, and that failure led directly to her death.
So not murder, but culpable negligence resulting in death. Do we know the sentence?
The source doesn't state the exact sentence, as it wasn't publicly disclosed. However, based on that specific charge, it was estimated to be relatively short, likely less than 5 years.
And what happened to them after?
The source reports they have since been released from prison, but beyond that, there's no further public information about their lives now. They seem to have disappeared from public view.
This whole story is just incredibly difficult to wrap your head around, isn't it? One thing that really jumps out from the source material is thinking about Feng-juan herself. She was a nurse?
Right. Trained in science, in medicine, someone you might assume would have a different framework for understanding illness or strange behavior.
Yet she became completely consumed by this. It really makes you question, doesn't it? Does belief, or perhaps psychological vulnerability, just override profession or education in situations like this?
It certainly challenges any easy assumptions. It suggests that deep cultural beliefs, intense family dynamics, and perhaps a susceptible psychological state, especially when combined with extreme environmental factors like that crushing isolation, well, it can potentially overwhelm anyone.
It's a stark reminder that psychological fragility doesn't really care about your job title.
Not at all. And I think a key takeaway here, reflected in the source's perspective, is about balance. Belief and faith are, deeply personal. But there has to be a grounding principle, not harming yourself and not harming others. This tragedy underscores the vital importance of, well, maybe mindfulness, critical thinking, even within strong belief systems.
And the mental health angle is just unavoidable. You can't look at this case without seeing it.
Absolutely impossible. A weakened psychological state, maybe a lack of healthy coping mechanisms, all drastically amplified by that environment. Dark, unsanitary, cut off from reality checks. It was like an incubator for that shared delusion.
Thinking about this for ourselves, for you listening, it's just such a terrible, extreme example of why looking after our own mental well-being is so critical.
And also being aware of those around us, noticing if someone seems increasingly isolated, withdrawn, showing signs of real distress, reaching out, offering support. It's not just being nice. In some situations, maybe it could help prevent someone or a whole family from spiraling into such a desperate, dangerous place. Community support matters.
The source also mentioned a connection to a movie, Incantation.
Yes, the 2022 horror film Incantation. Apparently, this case served as inspiration. The film reportedly explores similar themes, how faith can become warped, how belief systems can impact mental health and lead to, horrific outcomes. So if you're interested in seeing a fictionalized and apparently very intense take on some of these difficult ideas, the source notes that film is related.
So we spent this time looking into the sources for this incredibly disturbing story. It's a really stark look at how faith, isolation, the environment people are in, and deep psychological vulnerability can intersect with truly devastating consequences.
It leaves you with some really heavy questions, doesn't it?
It really does. How do we balance our own deeply held beliefs with the need for critical thinking, for compassion, especially when we're faced with things that seem inexplicable or supernatural? And maybe on a broader scale, how can communities better support mental health to prevent families from reaching such states of utter desperation? It's definitely a lot to think about.
It is indeed.
Thank you for joining us for this exploration of the source material. It was a difficult one. If you found this discussion valuable or thought-provoking, please do remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. That's Cheat on Each Horror Docs.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
We'll connect again on the next deep dive.